Stop blaming your precious little sister, you pathetic bully, my parents yelled. After my sister stole my mom's brand new SUV and wrecked it, then demanded I pay for it, so I went nuclear. Hey Reddit. So I woke up to missing keys and an empty driveway, because peace was never an option in this house. By noon, my family wanted me to commit a felony, so my sister could stay the favorite. I, 32 male, work auto claims. Mostly, I listen to people swear they barely tapped it, while describing a car that looks like it fought a bear. 8 years of that teaches you one thing. I screenshot stuff when I can smell a story changing. That skill came in handy the morning I woke up and my car keys were gone. Saturday, October, Midwest suburb, the kind where everyone knows each other's business, but pretends they don't. For the record, I wasn't living in my parents' basement. I moved back in short term during busy season to save money and cut my commute. I paid rent, paid utilities, and kept my stuff locked up because my sister treats ownership like a suggestion. I'd been looking forward to sleeping past 7 a.m. for the first time in 2 weeks because we just finished a nightmare month of back-to-back claims from a hailstorm that hit 3 counties. My eyes cracked open at 8:22 a.m. Hand reached for my dresser where I keep my keys, wallet, phone. Same spot every night. When something isn't where it should be, I notice immediately. Wallet, phone, no keys. I sat up, checked again, checked the floor, checked my jacket from the night before. Nothing. My heart started doing that thing where it knows something's wrong before your brain catches up. Quick context, my car had been in the shop for a week with transmission issues, parts on backorder. The only drivable vehicle at the house was Mom's brand new 2023 SUV, and I kept her spare key on my keyring because she kept misplacing hers. I walked to the window and looked at the driveway. Empty. Just oil stains where Mom's SUV should have been sitting. Here's some more background so the rest makes sense. Mom bought that SUV about a month earlier and asked me to park it in the driveway because her depth perception was garbage. I'd said sure. She'd handed me the spare key, told me I was the only one she trusted not to curb it or scrape it backing out. That SUV was her pride and joy. 35 grand. Silver paint, leather seats, all the safety features. That new car smell she'd threatened to disown anyone who ate inside it for ruining. She'd been making payments on it for 4 weeks. Still owed about $29,000 on the loan. She showed it off to everyone. The neighbors, her co-workers, random people at the grocery store who'd compliment the color. She'd spent 2 years saving for the down payment. I stood there in my boxers and a faded t-shirt from some 5K I ran 6 years ago, staring at that empty space, and my brain assembled the puzzle pieces before I even wanted it to. Kayla, my 28-year-old sister, still lived at home. Bounced between part-time jobs like it was an Olympic sport. Hostess at 3 different restaurants in the past year. Retail during the holidays. Dog walker for about 6 weeks until she got bored. She had a track record of taking stuff that wasn't hers and expecting everyone else to deal with it. Kayla had a history, not, oops, I borrowed your hoodie history. More like, took my laptop and returned it cracked, then cried until I got blamed for being mean, disappeared my headphones, and somehow they reappeared as lost, right after she needed money. And every time, my parents acted like the real crime was me noticing. But this was different. This wasn't headphones or $80. My phone buzzed. Number I half recognized. I opened the text and felt my stomach drop through the floor. It was a photo of Mom's SUV wrapped around a wooden fence post off some back road. Front end completely destroyed. Hood crumpled up like someone had stepped on an aluminum can. Airbags blown. Glass everywhere. The timestamp said 5:47 a.m. Nicole, one of Kayla's friends I'd met maybe twice, had sent the crash photo. She must have gotten my number from Kayla's phone. Then Bree started contradicting her in a separate thread. One said everyone walked away fine. The other said Kayla's wrist was messed up pretty bad. I screenshotted both conversations because they were already rewriting the night, and neither seemed to realize I could see both versions playing out in real time on my screen. Pieced together! They'd gone to some birthday party at a lake house about 2 hours away. Some guy named Tyler who threw these big blowouts every year. Kayla had been up all night partying and insisted she was fine to drive everyone home at dawn instead of sleeping it off. Fell asleep at the wheel, drifted off the road, plowed through that fence into a drainage ditch. 8 years in claims taught me that the first version of the story is never the last. So I screenshotted everything. Not because I wanted drama, but because I wanted truth that couldn't be edited. Because I knew exactly what was about to happen. And I wanted to be ready for the show. Mom came downstairs around 9 a.m. I heard her shuffling around in the kitchen, making coffee, humming some song from the radio. Dad was already out back doing something with the lawnmower. Normal Saturday morning in our suburban nightmare. I walked into the kitchen, told her a car was gone. My keys were missing, and Kayla took one of the vehicles. She blinked at me. Your car? The car, I repeated. Someone needs to check the driveway. She didn't move, just sighed like I'd told her the milk was expired. Okay, so Kayla borrowed your car. She probably had somewhere to be. Why are you making this into a thing? I showed her the photos on my phone. She grabbed it from my hands, stared at the wreckage. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. A car wrapped around a fence post in a ditch somewhere. She squinted at the screen. What happened? Barely a whisper. I explained. Told her Kayla grabbed my whole keyring off my dresser while I was asleep around 11 p.m. the night before. Took whatever car was in the driveway. 2 hours to some party at a lake, crashed it coming back because she was exhausted from partying all night. And now the car was totaled. Dad came in through the back door, saw the scene, asked what was going on. Mom handed him the phone. He squinted at the photo, then looked at me with this weird tightening around his jaw that I'd seen 1,000 times before when Kayla was involved. This is your car? I didn't answer. He shook his head. Look, it's not great, but it's just a car. Your car. You've got insurance. Why are you making this into a federal case? Why are you doing this? Mom added. Making everyone upset over your vehicle? You're always looking for ways to make her look bad, Dad said. This better not be some kind of setup. I told him to call Nicole himself if he didn't believe me. Gave him the number. I didn't argue. I just let them talk, because they always tell on themselves when they think you'll fold. Then came the part I'd been waiting for my whole life. Mom shook her head slowly. Kayla wouldn't steal. You probably left the keys somewhere she could find them. Maybe you told her she could borrow your car and forgot. She paused. You've been tired from work. Maybe you're confused. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead my case. I just watched her say the words out loud like she couldn't hear herself. Dad was already on the phone with Nicole, but he wasn't asking questions. He was telling her what to say. So he gave her permission to take his car, right? She said he told her she could? I stayed quiet and let them hang themselves with their own excuses. Kayla showed up around 1 p.m. Turned out Nicole's boyfriend had driven out to pick them up from the ER after the crash. I heard her key in the lock. Heard her trying to sneak in without being noticed. That particular shuffle she did when she was hoping to slide past everyone and disappear into her room before anyone could ask questions. I recognized it immediately. Same move she'd pulled 100 times before. She looked rough. Makeup smeared under her eyes like a raccoon. Hair tangled with what might have been a leaf stuck in it. Clothes wrinkled and grass-stained from whatever field she'd ended up in. A splint on her left wrist, bruises up her forearm. She smelled like campfire smoke and that stale smell of someone who hasn't slept in way too long. Mom rushed to her immediately, pulled her into a hug before she could even put down her bag. Asked if she was okay, where she'd been, what happened. The whole concerned mother routine while I stood in the doorway watching the script play out exactly as written. Kayla glanced at me over Mom's shoulder. I could see the gears turning. She was figuring out what story to tell, deciding how much we already knew. She pulled back from Mom. I stayed at a friend's house last night. Borrowed a car to get there. Didn't mention the crash. Didn't mention the totaled SUV. Just stood there looking tired and hoping that would be enough to make everyone stop asking questions. I held up my phone with the crash photo on the screen. Her face went white. Actually white. Like someone had drained the color out in real time. It's not what it looks like. Mom spun around, saw the photo again. Kayla, what is going on? I watched my sister pivot in real time. Watched her process the fact that I had evidence. Watched her search for an angle that would make her the victim in all this. He gave me permission. The words came out fast, practiced. I asked him last night if I could borrow his car, and he said yes. He left the keys out for me on purpose. And the accident wasn't even my fault. A deer ran across the road and I swerved. Dad's whole posture relaxed. See? It's his car. She had permission. This is between the two of you. Mom nodded, relieved. Exactly. Your car, your insurance, your problem. I don't know why you're dragging the whole family into this. Then Kayla pulled out her phone and turned to me. Tell them. Tell them you said yes. Go ahead. Tell Mom you gave me permission. Dad stepped closer. Just say it. Say you told her she could take it. This doesn't have to be a whole thing over your beat-up car. No. Not, I don't want to. Not, maybe later. Just no. I work claims. I know what fraud smells like. I said I was asleep. Said she took my keys from my dresser without asking sometime around 11 p.m., based on timestamps from her friend's texts. You're lying! Kayla's voice went shrill. You've always been jealous of me. You're always looking for ways to make me look bad. You're being cruel and unfair and vindictive. And here's the part that still makes me shake my head. Mom's expression softened. That mom brain kicking in again. Logic going right out the window. Why are you making such a big deal? It's your car. You have insurance. If you really love this family, you'd stop trying to get your sister in trouble over your own vehicle. Dad nodded along. Exactly. Handle it yourself, file a claim, move on. I stayed quiet, let them finish. Then I asked Mom if she wanted to call the insurance company herself, or if she needed help with the phone number. The room went dead silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the kitchen wall. Dad laughed. Why would she call? It's your car. I kept my voice steady. My car's been in the shop for a week. Transmission issues. Parts on backorder. The only vehicle in the driveway last night was Mom's SUV. Mom's face flickered. No, she took your car. She said, she took my keys. My keys had Mom's spare on them. The spare I've been holding because Mom keeps losing hers. Mom shook her head hard. No, that's not. Bree said it was silver and new. Mom's SUV is silver and new. She wasn't hearing it. Grabbed her phone and called Bree herself. I watched her face as Bree confirmed she didn't know whose car it was. Just that it was silver, and new, and nice. Mom hung up. That proves nothing. I pulled up the photos from Nicole, zoomed in on the license plate barely visible in the corner of the frame. Mom grabbed my phone, stared at it. Her hands were shaking so hard the image was bouncing. Her plate, her registration, her car. That's my SUV? Yeah. The color drained from her face. $29,000 still owed. 4 weeks of payments on a car that was now scrap metal in a ditch 2 hours away. She turned on me. Not Kayla, me. Immediately. Why didn't you tell us immediately? Why did you let us stand here thinking it was your car? You let this whole conversation happen knowing it was mine? I stared at her. I told you a car was missing. I showed you the photos. You decided it was mine because that was easier to dismiss. You should have been clearer. You should have... She stopped, swallowed. The reality was starting to land. Kayla backed up toward the wall. Started talking fast, words tumbling out in a panic. I didn't know. I thought it was his car. It was dark and I couldn't tell the difference. The keys were right there and I just assumed. Mom finally turned to look at her. I've never seen that expression on her face before. All that protective mom energy just vanished. Like a switch flipped and suddenly the person standing there wasn't her baby girl anymore. It was the person who just cost her $35,000. Mom's voice went cold. Why did you take any car without permission in the first place? Why did you go into someone's room at 11 p.m. and take their keys off their dresser? Why would you ever think that's acceptable behavior? Dad jumped in. Everyone needs to calm down. This is clearly a misunderstanding. We can sort it out as a family. The important thing is nobody got hurt. Same script he'd been reading from forever. Mom turned on him so fast I thought she might pull a muscle. Do you understand we still owe $29,000 on that car? Do you understand insurance might not cover anything because she's not on our policy? Do you understand your precious daughter just destroyed months of savings in one night of partying? Dad went quiet. That was new. Usually he doubled down. Kayla kept apologizing. Said she was sorry. Over and over. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm so sorry. Like a broken record that thought repetition would make everything go away. I went upstairs, locked my door, started transferring all the screenshots to a USB drive. Could hear them arguing through the floor. Could hear Kayla's voice getting higher and more desperate. Could hear Mom's voice getting sharper and colder. Could hear Dad trying to play peacemaker and failing miserably. Something had finally cracked. Anyway, insurance did what insurance does. Mom was on the phone with the insurance company for almost 6 hours over the next 3 days. The adjuster wasn't rude, just dead-eyed over the phone. Turns out when Mom set up the policy, she'd signed a named driver exclusion for Kayla to keep the premiums down. Kayla had 2 at-fault accidents on her record from her early 20s, and adding her would have jacked up the rate by 40%. So Mom checked the box that said Kayla would never operate the vehicle, ever, under any circumstances. In writing, signed and dated. I watched Mom's face when the adjuster read that clause back to her. That moment when she remembered signing it. When she realized she'd excluded her own daughter to save money. And now that decision had come back to eat her alive. The adjuster had seen this exact scenario play out dozens of times. Family member takes a car without permission, wrecks it. Everyone's shocked when insurance tells them to pound sand. Claim denied, no coverage, no exceptions, no appeals. Here's the financial damage in one brutal paragraph. $6,000 down payment, gone. $29,000 still owed on a ghost vehicle. Tow yard fees and storage charges stacking daily. Bank threatening legal action. Mom driving a 15-year-old sedan with 140,000 miles that rattled when it went over 55, while still paying for a car that didn't exist anymore. All because her golden child couldn't call an Uber. The first real blow-up happened 4 days after the crash. I came home from work to find both my parents waiting for me in the kitchen. Mom at the table with papers spread out in front of her. Dad standing with his arms crossed, face set in that expression he used when he was about to threaten something. He'd positioned himself between me and the hallway like they'd planned this ambush all afternoon. We need to talk about your responsibility in this situation. Dad didn't waste time. I set my bag down slowly, asked what responsibility he was referring to. Mom slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a breakdown of the costs, the remaining loan balance, the tow fees, the storage charges, the down payment, everything itemized in her neat handwriting with a total circled at the bottom. Your keys, she said. Your responsibility. If you'd kept them secured, none of this would have happened. Kayla wouldn't have been able to take the car in the first place. I stared at her. Asked if she was serious. Dad stepped closer. You left those keys where anyone could find them. You were careless. And now your mother is facing financial ruin because of your negligence. I told them my keys were on my dresser, in my room, at 11 p.m. while I was sleeping. Said the only way anyone could have taken them was by entering my room while I was asleep and physically removing them. Said that wasn't carelessness. That was theft. Stop blaming your precious little sister, you pathetic bully. Dad's voice went hard. She made a mistake. You made it possible. The fair thing is for you to help cover these costs since you're equally at fault. Mom nodded. We've talked about it. We think you should contribute at least half, $15,000 toward the loan, plus the storage fees that are still accumulating. That's when it hit me. They weren't just defending Kayla anymore. They were trying to make me pay for what she did. I asked them if they'd actually thought this through. Asked if they understood they were asking me to pay for a vehicle I never drove, never crashed, and never gave anyone permission to take. You need to think about your future in this family. Dad stepped even closer. We can still make this go away if you cooperate. Call the insurance company. Tell them you gave Kayla permission to drive your mother's car. Say it was a miscommunication and help cover the gap. He was asking me to commit insurance fraud and pay $15,000. To protect Kayla, I told him no. Told him what he was describing was a felony. Told him I wasn't going to prison or bankruptcy, so Kayla could avoid consequences for the 100th time. You're being selfish. You care more about being right than about this family. His face was red now. Maybe the reason she took the keys in the first place is because you made her feel like she couldn't ask you directly. You created an environment where she had to sneak around. I told him that was the most deranged logic I'd ever heard, and I was done discussing it. If you can't be part of the solution, maybe you should think about finding your own place to live. That threat hung in the air for about 3 seconds before I told him I'd already been thinking about it. Told him I'd start looking this weekend. Told him it would be nice to live somewhere where my belongings didn't disappear in the middle of the night and I didn't get invoiced for other people's disasters. Then I went upstairs, locked my door, and started browsing apartment listings. The next morning, I filed a police report. I'd been planning to just document it and leave it alone. Paper trail. Protect myself. But they had crossed a line. They hadn't just asked me to lie. They demanded I commit fraud and pay for damages I didn't cause. If they were willing to do that, I needed protection that was stronger than screenshots. I drove to the station, sat down with an officer, and gave a statement about what happened. The theft of my keyring, the unauthorized use of the vehicle, the crash. I also told him my parents were pressuring me to make false statements to the insurance company and demanding I pay restitution for their losses. All of it documented and on record with timestamps and witness contacts. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes, not because I wanted her arrested, because my family had made it clear that love meant I was supposed to sacrifice my career, my freedom, and my savings to protect Kayla from herself. That's not love. That's extortion with a family photo on the wall. 3 days later, a detective called the house to follow up. Suddenly, everyone cared about family again. Kayla came unglued. She'd been served notice that she was being investigated for vehicle theft and reckless operation. Not arrested, not yet, but the wheels were turning. She screamed at me in the hallway, called me a monster, said I was trying to ruin her life over one mistake. I told her one mistake was grabbing the wrong coffee order. This was a series of choices. And now the state was involved because our parents tried to make me commit a felony and empty my savings to clean up her mess. Mom stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, face gray. She didn't defend Kayla this time. Didn't defend Dad either. Didn't mention the $15,000 anymore. Just stood there looking like she'd aged 10 years in a week. Dad tried the peacemaker routine again. Told everyone to calm down. Said we could still fix this if I dropped the charges and reconsidered helping with the costs. I told him I wasn't dropping anything or paying anything. Told him he'd pushed me into this corner by demanding I commit fraud and subsidize Kayla's consequences, and now he could watch the fallout unfold. Then I went back to my room and started packing boxes. I found an apartment 2 weeks later. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Signed the lease on a Friday. Spent the weekend moving my stuff out while my parents watched with this weird mix of anger and disbelief. Kayla tried to talk to me while I was loading boxes into my car. Stood in the driveway blocking my path like we were about to have some big dramatic moment. Are you really doing this? You're abandoning the family over a mistake? Her voice cracked. I offered to pay mom back and nobody will give me a chance. And that police report? I could get in real trouble if the charges go through. I set down the box I was carrying and looked at her. Really looked at her. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was unwashed. She looked like someone who was starting to realize the safety net had disappeared. Told her it wasn't a mistake. Said a mistake is grabbing the wrong coat at a restaurant. Taking someone's keys at 11 p.m. while they're asleep, driving their car 2 hours to a party, and crashing it because you were too tired to keep your eyes open is a series of choices. One after another, after another. Said she made those choices, and now she was facing the consequences. And I wasn't going to feel guilty about refusing to shield her from reality. You're cold. You've always been like this. You care more about rules than people. Real family would help each other through hard times. I told her real family doesn't steal from each other, and then demand the victim pay for the damages. I loaded the last box, got in my car, and drove away. Didn't look back. My parents didn't call for 3 weeks. When mom finally reached out, it was to tell me things were getting worse. She asked if I could help. Not with money anymore, she said. Just with Kayla. Just to drop the charges. Said Kayla was spiraling, not working, not leaving her room, not contributing anything to the household while consuming resources they couldn't afford. I told her that sucked, didn't offer solutions, didn't volunteer to fix it. She got frustrated. Why are you being so cold? I'm your mother, and I'm struggling. I told her I was sorry she was struggling, genuinely was. But I also told her that Kayla was 28 years old and had been enabled by both of them for her entire life. Said this was the natural result of never making her face consequences. Said I wasn't going to jump back into the pit with them now that the fire was getting hot. She hung up on me. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Nicole, same friend who'd sent me the crash photos. She wanted to give me a heads up that Kayla had been telling everyone a different version of events, saying I'd given her permission to take the car, saying I filed charges out of spite because she accidentally damaged my vehicle, saying the family turned against her because I manipulated them. She was making herself the victim. I thanked Nicole for letting me know. Then I did something petty but satisfying. I screenshotted her original messages to me from the night of the crash. The ones where she'd laid out exactly what happened. The party, the driving while exhausted, the crash, all of it with timestamps. She was building a narrative where she was innocent and I was the villain. She was recruiting flying monkeys, and I don't negotiate with propaganda. I dropped those receipts in a private family group chat with the extended relatives who'd been hearing Kayla's version. No commentary. No accusations, just the receipts. My phone exploded. Texts from aunts and uncles asking what was going on. From cousins who'd been told I was a monster. From my grandmother who said she'd always suspected Kayla was trouble, but everyone kept telling her she was imagining things. My parents were furious. Dad called me screaming about airing dirty laundry. Mom sent a long text about how I'd humiliated Kayla and damaged her reputation with the family. I didn't respond to any of it. 2 days later, Mom gave Kayla 30 days to move out. Then came the exile. Kayla bounced from friend to friend like a pinball with a credit problem. Nicole lasted 3 weeks before catching her trying to use her credit card online. Another friend gave her 5 days. An ex-boyfriend took her back for about a week before realizing nothing had changed. Extended family had heard the real story by then. Nobody wanted to be the next person whose stuff disappeared or whose trust got violated. The criminal case moved slowly. Kayla ended up with a plea deal. Diversion program, mandatory classes, restitution payments to mom, community service hours that she complained about constantly. No jail time, but a record that would follow her if she stepped out of line again. She had check-ins with a probation officer, actual accountability for the first time in her life. She called me once during this period, late at night, voice raw from crying, the real kind this time, not the performance. She asked why I was doing this to her, asked what she had to do to make things right. Said she was running out of options and places to stay. Said she was scared. I told her I wasn't doing anything to her. Said I was just not doing anything for her. Said there was a difference. Said she'd spent her whole life expecting other people to absorb the cost of her choices, and now she was learning what happened when that stopped. She said that was cruel. I told her maybe it was. Told her I wasn't a saint. But I also told her I'd spent years watching her take things and break things and lose things while everyone made excuses. Said I'd watched her face 0 consequences for behavior that would have destroyed anyone else's life. Said maybe having to figure things out on her own for once wasn't cruelty. Maybe it was the first honest thing anyone had done for her. She hung up. After a few weeks of couch surfing and mandatory classes, Kayla got a job, part-time at some retail store doing inventory. She found a room to rent in a house with 3 other people. Not glamorous. Shared bathroom. Tiny closet. But it was something she was paying for herself. My parents reached out around Christmas. Asked if I'd come to dinner. Said they wanted to try to repair things. Said the family should be together for the holidays. I told them I'd think about it. I did think about it. For about 10 seconds. Then I texted back and said no. Said I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine while nothing had actually changed. Said, until they acknowledged what happened and stopped treating me like the problem, I didn't see the point in fake family harmony. Dad called me ungrateful. Mom cried. Same script. Same cast. Different price tag. I spent Christmas with friends instead. Drank hot chocolate. Watched bad movies. Didn't think about my family once. Fast forward 11 months. Almost a full year since the crash. I was settled into my apartment. My car had been fixed months ago and was running fine. Work was good. I'd gotten a promotion to senior claims specialist, bump in pay, more responsibility. Life was better than it had been when I lived under my parents' roof, constantly waiting for the next crisis Kayla would create. The legal stuff finally wrapped up around that time. Kayla's case had gone through the system. Diversion program completed, restitution payments ongoing, community service hours logged. She'd avoided jail, but just barely. The record would follow her for years. But that wasn't the interesting part. Dad got dragged into it. Turns out when you pressure someone into committing insurance fraud, and that someone reports it to the police, things get complicated. The detective handling Kayla's case had taken notes during our conversations. Detailed notes. About who said what, who pressured whom, who demanded false statements be made to an insurance company. Dad got called in for questioning. Twice. I wasn't there for the interviews, but I heard about them through the family grapevine. Apparently, he showed up the first time thinking he could charm his way out of it. Deflection and excuses. Same playbook he'd used his whole life. Didn't work so well when there was a paper trail and recorded statements from his own son. The second interview, he brought a lawyer. That's when reality started landing. He wasn't charged with anything in the end. Not enough evidence to prosecute, the DA decided. But the investigation stayed on file. His name was in the system now. And word got around. Small towns talk. Midwest suburbs talk even more. Someone at the police station knew someone who knew someone from Dad's office. Within weeks, half his workplace had heard some version of Dave tried to make his son commit insurance fraud to cover for his daughter. Not exactly the reputation he'd spent 30 years building. His boss called him in for a conversation about professional conduct. HR opened a file. Nothing actionable, but the kind of thing that follows you around when promotion season comes. The kind of thing people remember when they're deciding who to trust with client accounts and company resources. Dad's response? Blamed me. Obviously. He called me once, about 2 months after the investigation closed. Voice tight with that particular combination of rage and self-pity I'd grown up hearing whenever something went wrong in his life. You've ruined my reputation, my career, my marriage. Are you happy now? I told him I didn't ruin anything. Said he made choices and those choices had consequences. Said I just declined to participate in covering them up. You're not my son anymore. Told him that was fine by me. Hung up. Blocked his number. Mom filed for divorce 3 weeks later. The investigation had been the final straw. Not because Dad tried to pressure me into fraud, but because she'd found out he'd been secretly sending Kayla money the entire time. Hundreds of dollars a month, wired to accounts Mom didn't know existed. While she was struggling to make payments on a car that was scrap metal in a junkyard, Dad was funding Kayla's lifestyle behind her back. She found the bank statements doing taxes, months of transfers, lies stacked on top of lies. The divorce finalized 6 months after that. Mom got the house. Dad got a studio apartment across town and whatever was left of his professional reputation. Last I heard, he'd transferred to a different branch in a different city, starting over at 57 because he couldn't let his golden child face a single consequence without trying to rig the game. The financial damage never fully healed. Mom's still paying off that loan for the SUV Kayla totaled. Will be for another 3 years at least. She drives the same rattling sedan she bought after the crash. Hasn't spoken to Kayla since kicking her out. Hasn't spoken to Dad since the papers were signed. As for Kayla, last I heard through cousins, she's working retail somewhere, renting a room with strangers, still paying restitution every month. Whether she's actually changed or just learned to be more careful about who she steals from, couldn't tell you. Don't really care to find out either. Not my circus anymore. I spent last Christmas with friends, good people, the kind who don't take your stuff while you're sleeping or expect you to commit felonies on their behalf. We ordered pizza, watched bad movies, played cards until 2 a.m. I didn't think about my family once. My apartment is quiet. My keys stay on my dresser every night. Nobody touches them. Funny how simple life gets when you stop living with people who treat your belongings like communal property and your boundaries like suggestions. That empty driveway almost 2 years ago felt like the worst morning of my life. Turns out it was the morning I finally stopped being the family cleanup crew. They made the mess. They're still cleaning it up. I'm just over here living my life. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.